6 words. That is all the message contained. Operation Compass. Attack begins 0500. No grand pronouncements, no soaring rhetoric, just a stark directive for an offensive that would shatter an army. It was December 1940, and the sands of the North African desert were about to witness a British gamble of audacious proportions, a desperate strike against overwhelming odds. How could such a small force hope to turn the tide against an empire, and what hidden courage would it demand? In the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Western Desert, a solitary figure shoulders the immense weight of Britain's war effort in the Middle East. This is General Sir Archibald Percival Wavell, Commander-in-Chief Middle East Command. Born on May 5, 1883, in Colchester, England, Wavell is a man of quiet intellect, often described as more at home with poetry and literature than the clamor of battle. He graduated at the top of his class from Sandhurst Military Academy in 1901 and was commissioned into the storied Black Watch Regiment. His early career saw him decorated 5 times for distinguished service in the Second Boer War, and he fought bravely on India's northwest frontier. A veteran of the First World War, Wavell earned the Military Cross for his actions at the Second Battle of Ypres in 1915, where a shell splinter cost him his left eye. Despite this profound injury, he remained in the British Army, serving as a Brigadier General Staff under General Edmund Allenby in Palestine. Now, in December 1940, Wavell stands at the helm of a command stretching across 9 countries and 2 continents, a staggering 1,800 miles by 2,000 miles. He faces a critical situation. Italy, under Benito Mussolini, declared war on Britain and France in June 1940, and in September, the Italian Tenth Army, commanded by Marshal Rodolfo Graziani, advanced into Egypt from Libya. They pushed approximately 95 to 100 kilometers, about 60 miles, into Egyptian territory before halting at Makhtila, establishing a series of fortified camps that stretched in an arc towards Sidi Barrani. Wavell's forces, known as the Western Desert Force, WDF, are severely outnumbered. Against an estimated 80,000 to 150,000 Italian and Libyan troops in Egypt, supported by hundreds of tanks and artillery pieces, Wavell can muster only about 30,000 to 36,000 men. The Italian Tenth Army also boasts a substantial air force, with approximately 140 bombers and 191 fighters available in the theater, though many are far to the west. The British, in contrast, have around 142 aircraft supporting the WDF. The numerical disadvantage is stark, a ratio of at least 2 to 1, and in some areas, significantly higher. The obstacles confronting General Wavell are immense, extending far beyond the sheer numerical disparity. Prime Minister Winston Churchill, reeling from setbacks in Europe, craves offensive action, and Wavell is under immense pressure to deliver a victory. Yet, his resources are stretched thin across a vast and vital theater. His Middle East Command, initially established with a headquarters staff of just 5 officers, must manage not only the desert campaign but also potential threats across the region. The Italian defensive positions themselves present a formidable challenge. Marshal Graziani, despite his later hesitancy, has ordered the construction of 6 main fortified camps: Makhtila, Nibewa, Tumar East, Tumar West, Rabia, and Sofafai. These camps are not merely dugouts, they are designed as strongpoints, complete with anti-tank ditches, barbed wire, and heavy artillery. The Italian 1st and 2nd Libyan Divisions, along with the 4th Blackshirt Division, man the coastal sector and the Tumar camps. The Malati Group, a motorized unit equipped with Fiat M1139s medium tanks and L333s tankettes, holds the Nibewa camp. The 63rd Infantry Division, Serene, occupies Rabia and Sofafai, while the 62nd Infantry Division, Marmarika, is positioned along the escarpment towards Halfaya Pass. The 64th Infantry Division, Catanzaro, is east of Buk. These camps are positioned in an arc approximately 80 kilometers, 50 miles, long, from the Mediterranean coast inland to the escarpment. However, a critical flaw exists in the Italian defenses. The camps are widely spaced, too far apart to offer mutual support. This tactical error, combined with a general overconfidence born of numerical superiority and a lack of proper reconnaissance, creates a vulnerability that Wavell and his commanders, particularly Lieutenant General Richard O'Connor, the audacious commander of the Western Desert Force, intend to exploit. The desert itself is another opponent. The terrain is a vast, open expanse of sand and rock, punctuated by escarpments and wadis. Daytime temperatures can be scorching, while nights bitterly cold. Logistics are a nightmare. Every drop of water, every gallon of fuel, every bullet must be transported across immense distances. The British supply lines stretch back to Mersa Matruh, some 120 miles from the frontier, and over 200 miles west of the Nile. The Italians, too, face similar logistical headaches, having halted their September advance partly due to stretched supply lines. No one believed it was possible for such a small, under-resourced force to launch a successful offensive against a numerically superior, entrenched enemy. Many in London, and even some within the Middle East Command, viewed any offensive beyond mere raids as an act of desperation. They were about to be proven catastrophically wrong. The plan, codenamed Operation Compass, is born of audacious thinking. Lieutenant General Richard O'Connor, known for his boldness, conceives a daring maneuver. A wide, sweeping flanking movement, deep into the desert, to strike the Italian camps from their undefended rear. This is not to be a frontal assault, but a lightning raid designed for maximum shock and disorganization. On the night of December 7, 1940, the Western Desert Force begins its approach. Under the cover of darkness, with minimal dust raised, the 7th Armored Division, famously known as the Desert Rats, and the 4th Indian Infantry Division, along with supporting units, advance approximately 113 kilometers, 70 miles, to their start lines. The air is cold, the moon full, and the only sounds are the rumble of tracks and the hushed commands of officers. The Royal Air Force initiates the offensive with coordinated strikes. Blenheim bombers from Egypt and Wellington bombers from Malta launch raids on Italian airfields at Castel Benito, Benina, and El Adem. On December 7, these attacks destroy or damage 29 Italian aircraft on the ground, crippling vital air support before the ground battle even begins. At precisely 5 a.m. on December 9, 1940, British artillery unleashes a thunderous barrage upon the Italian camp at Nibewa. The 4th Indian Division, supported by the heavily armored Matilda II infantry tanks of the 7th Royal Tank Regiment, surges forward. The Italian Maletti Group, comprising 7 Libyan motorized infantry battalions and a company of Fiat M1139s tanks, is caught completely by surprise. The Matildas, impervious to most Italian anti-tank weapons, spearhead the assault. General Pietro Maletti, commander of the Maletti Group, attempts to engage the British tanks with a light machine gun but is tragically killed in the opening minutes of the battle. The Cameron Highlanders, part of the 4th Indian Division, sweep through the camp with bayonets. By 8:30 a.m., Nibewa has fallen. The cost to the Italians is catastrophic. Over 800 Italian and Libyan soldiers are dead, 1,300 wounded, and 2,000 captured. British casualties, in stark contrast, amount to only 56 men. With Nibewa secured, the British forces press on. The 7th Royal Tank Regiment advances north to assist the 5th Indian Brigade in its assault on Tamar West. A sudden, fierce sandstorm sweeps across the desert, temporarily hampering the advance and reducing visibility to near zero. Yet, as the weather clears, Indian and New Zealand forces push through the swirling dust. By 4 p.m., most of Tamar West is in British hands, and Tamar East falls by nightfall. The 2nd Libyan Division suffers heavily at Makdila, forced into the sand dunes where British cruiser tanks overrun them. The division loses 26 officers and 1,327 men killed, 32 officers and 804 men wounded, with all remaining survivors taken prisoner. Simultaneously, the 4th Armored Brigade of the 7th Armored Division executes its crucial flanking maneuver, cutting the coast road to the west of Sidi Barrani, effectively trapping the Italian forces. If you had witnessed the speed and ferocity of this initial assault, seen an army thought invincible crumble so quickly, would you have believed it was sustainable? Tell me in the comments. On December 10, the focus shifts to Sidi Barrani itself. The 16th Infantry Brigade, reinforced with elements of the 11th Indian Brigade, advances in lorries to attack the town. Supported by divisional artillery and the 7th Royal Tank Regiment, they are in position by 1:30 p.m., blocking the southern and southwestern exits. The British attack begins at 4 p.m. By nightfall, Sidi Barrani is captured. The Italian collapse is dramatic. Over 5,000 prisoners are taken by the evening of December 10, and the 7th Hussars report capturing acres of officers and hundreds of acres of men, as they cut off the retreat route at Buk Buk. The 4th Blackshirt and 1st Libyan divisions find themselves surrounded. Within the Italian lines, a profound sense of confusion and dismay takes hold. Marshal Rodolfo Graziani, the supreme commander, known for his past brutal campaigns against tribal forces, struggles to adapt to modern mechanized warfare. His initial invasion of Egypt had been slow and ponderous, characterized by extended halts and a reliance on fixed fortifications. He had assured Mussolini that his largely unmechanized army was ill-equipped to face the more mobile British. As the British assault begins, the Italian command structure falters. General Mario Berti, commander of the 10th Army, is on sick leave, leaving General Italo Garibaldi in temporary command. Orders are often unclear, communication between the widely spaced camps is poor, and the intelligence regarding British strength and intentions is critically flawed. Many Italian soldiers, already poorly trained and equipped compared to their British counterparts, are demoralized by the sudden, overwhelming attack from an unexpected direction. The rapid penetration by British tanks, against which their anti-tank defenses prove largely ineffective, shatters their resolve. The expectation was a slow, deliberate British withdrawal, not a daring, deep thrust. The sheer speed of the British advance, combined with the devastating effectiveness of their artillery and tanks, creates a sense of being outmaneuvered and outfought before the battle has truly begun. By late December 11, the remnants of the Italian divisions retreating from Sidi Barrani and Buk Buk are crammed onto the coastal road, transforming them into easy targets. Royal Navy vessels, including HMS Terror and 2 gunboats, bombard the Sollum area throughout the day and much of the night, adding to the chaos and destruction. On December 11, the 7th Armored Brigade is ordered to relieve the 4th Armored Brigade in the Buk Buk area and mop up the thousands of scattered Italian soldiers and guns. A patrol from the 7th Support Group finds Rabia empty. The 63rd Infantry Division, Serene, has withdrawn overnight from Rabia and Sofafai. However, an order to the 4th Armored Brigade to cut off their retreat west of Sofafai arrives too late, allowing some Italian forces to retire along the escarpment and link up with other Italian units at Halfaya Pass. By the end of December 12, the only remaining Italian positions in Egypt are at the approaches to Sollum and the vicinity of Sidi Omar. The British advance is relentless. On December 14, the 4th Indian Infantry Division, having performed magnificently, is redeployed to East Africa to counter other Italian threats, a testament to the fluid nature of the war. Its place in the Western Desert Force is taken by the 6th Australian Division. By December 15, Sollum and the strategically vital Halfaya Pass are captured. Fort Capuzzo, located 64 kilometers (40 miles) inland at the end of the frontier wire, is also taken by the 7th Armored Division as it presses westward towards Bardia. The initial phase of Operation Compass has yielded astonishing results. In less than a week, the British Western Desert Force has inflicted a crushing defeat. The Italians have suffered an estimated 2,147 to 5,500 plus killed, 2,208 to 10,000 wounded, and a staggering 38,300 prisoners, including 4 generals. They have lost 73 to 420 tanks, 237 to 845 guns, and approximately 1,000 vehicles. The British casualties, in stark contrast, are remarkably low: 133 to 500 killed, 387 to 1,373 wounded, and 8 to 55 missing, with 26 aircraft lost. The sheer imbalance of these figures underscores the devastating effectiveness of O'Connor's surprise attack and Wavell's strategic gamble. Wavell, ever cautious, initially describes the operation not as an offensive, but as an important raid, a 5-day strike. Yet, the scale of the Italian collapse presents an unforeseen opportunity. He gives Lieutenant General O'Connor the directive to exploit any advantage, to push further. The 7th Armored Division now concentrates southwest of Bardia, awaiting the arrival of the 6th Australian Division. The stage is set for the next phase of Operation Compass, an offensive that was never intended to be more than a limited engagement, now transforming into a full-scale pursuit across the desert. The logistical challenges become even more acute as the British lines of supply stretch further into hostile territory. Imagine the morale of the British and Commonwealth troops at this moment, having achieved such an overwhelming victory against a numerically superior foe. How would you have felt, knowing you were part of such a dramatic turnaround? Tell me in the comments. The advance continues. The Western Desert Force, now reinforced by the 6th Australian Division, prepares to tackle the next major Italian stronghold, Bardia, a heavily fortified port town just inside Libya. The Ida Liens, under the command of Lieutenant General Annibale Bergonzoli, known as Electric Whiskers, for his distinctive facial hair, attempt to establish a new defensive line. Bergonzoli is determined to hold Bardia, which Mussolini has declared a fortress to be defended at all costs. The Australian 6th Division, fresh to the desert theatre, begins its preparations for the assault on Bardia. Reconnaissance by the 11th Hussars provides crucial intelligence on the Italian positions, including detailed maps of the defences. The fortress is ringed by a triple line of anti-tank ditches, barbed wire, and concrete bunkers, manned by an estimated 40,000 Italian troops and supported by over 400 guns. On December 31, 1940, British artillery begins a steady bombardment of Bardia, softening the defences. The Royal Navy also contributes, with vessels providing naval gunfire support from the Mediterranean. The plan is for the Australian infantry to breach the outer defences, creating a bridgehead for the tanks to exploit, and then to cut the town in two. The new year dawns with the Battle of Bardia. On January 3, 1941, the 6th Australian Division launches its attack. Engineers blow gaps in the barbed wire and fill anti-tank ditches, often under intense enemy fire. Australian infantry pour through the breaches, establishing a foothold within the fortress. The fighting is fierce, but the coordinated assault, combining infantry, artillery, and tanks, proves too much for the Italian defenders. Thousands of Italian troops, cut off and demoralized, begin to surrender. The 7th Armored Division, positioned to the west, effectively mops up escaping forces. By January 5, after 3 days of intense fighting, Bardia falls. The victory is immense. The British and Commonwealth forces capture over 25,000 Italian prisoners, along with nearly 500 guns and 120 tanks. British and Australian casualties are remarkably light. Fewer than 150 Allied soldiers are killed in the Battle of Bardia. General Bergonzoli is among the captives. The capture of Bardia opens the road to Tobruk, a vital port deeper into Cyrenaica, Libya. Operation Compass, initially conceived as a limited 5-day raid, has now evolved into a full-scale campaign, pushing the Italians hundreds of kilometers back into their own territory. The speed of the advance, combined with the sheer number of prisoners, creates logistical challenges for the British, who are unprepared for such a massive influx of captives. The advance towards Tobruk begins immediately. The 7th Armored Division continues its relentless pursuit, while the 6th Australian Division prepares for another assault on a fortified port. Tobruk is a larger, even more heavily defended position than Bardia, with a garrison of approximately 27,000 Italian soldiers. On January 21, 1941, the Australians launch their attack on Tobruk. At dawn, Australian infantry break into the defences, creating a path for 18 British I tanks. The Australians press forward, capturing half of the Tobruk defences by nightfall. The battle continues into January 22, and by its conclusion, the British and Commonwealth forces have taken another 25,000 prisoners, 208 guns, and 87 tanks. Allied losses are again minimal, with 355 Australian and 45 British troops killed. The fall of Tobruk is another devastating blow to the Italian 10th Army. The British and Commonwealth forces are now deep within Italian Libya, having advanced over 500 miles, 800 kilometers, in just over a month. The Italian High Command is in disarray. General Giuseppe Tallera takes over command of the 10th Army in December 1940, but he will ultimately be killed in action in February 1941. The momentum of Operation Compass is unstoppable. The 7th Armored Division, with its relentless pursuit, races ahead to cut off the retreating Italian forces. The ultimate objective is to prevent the remaining elements of the 10th Army from escaping into Tripolitania, the western province of Libya. Considering the rapid and decisive victories, and the minimal casualties suffered by the British and Commonwealth forces, which side of this story do you think history got wrong? Tell me in the comments. The decisive moment of Operation Compass arrives in early February 1941, at a desolate, windswept crossroads in the Libyan desert near Beit Afam. The remnants of the Italian 10th Army, estimated to be around 25,000 men, with hundreds of vehicles and artillery pieces, are in full retreat along the Via Balbia, the coastal road, desperately trying to reach the safety of El Agheila and beyond. They are exhausted, demoralized, and running low on supplies. Lieutenant General O'Connor, recognizing the opportunity for a complete annihilation of the Italian force, orders a daring, high-stakes gamble. He dispatches a small, fast-moving ad hoc force, known as Combe Force, under the command of Lieutenant Colonel John Combe. This force, composed primarily of elements from the 7th Armored Division, including armored cars, artillery, and motorized infantry, is tasked with a seemingly impossible mission: to leave the coastal road at MSUs, take an unreconnoitered shortcut across 240 kilometers, 150 miles, of trackless desert, and intercept the retreating Italian column at Beit Afam, blocking their escape. The 6th Australian Division continues its pursuit along the coastal road, pressing the Italians from the east. But it is Combe Force's desert dash that holds the key to sealing the trap. The journey is arduous. The harsh terrain, with its soft sand and rocky outcrops, slows the advance. To maintain speed, Combe Force is further divided, with lighter, faster elements pushing ahead, leaving tracked vehicles to follow. Late in the afternoon of February 4, the first elements of Combe Force arrive at MSUs, clearing the local garrison. They press on through the night and the following day. By 4 p.m. on February 5, British artillery and infantry are in position, spread across the coastal road at Beit Afam, directly in the path of the unsuspecting Italian column. Just 30 minutes later, the head of the retreating Italian column appears. The Italian soldiers, expecting a clear route to safety, are stunned to find British forces blocking their path. They mistakenly believe the British blocking force is far larger than it actually is. With the Australians closing in from the east, the Italians are trapped. A desperate battle ensues. Newly arrived Fiat M13 40th's medium tank battalions are thrown against the British positions in a series of frantic, costly attacks, attempting to break through the blockade. But Combe Force holds firm. Throughout February 6, the 7th Armored Division's main tank force arrives, harassing the Italian eastern flank, adding to the pressure. On the morning of February 7, the Italians launch a final, desperate attempt to break through the British lines. Wave after wave of infantry and tanks charge, but they are repelled by fierce British resistance. The Italian 10th Army, utterly exhausted and out of ammunition, their morale shattered, begins to surrender en masse. By the end of February 7, 1941, the Battle of Beit Afam is over. The Italian 10th Army is completely destroyed. The British and Commonwealth forces capture approximately 25,000 additional prisoners, including General Tolera, who is mortally wounded. Hundreds of Italian tanks, artillery pieces, and vehicles are captured or destroyed. What does it tell you about a man that he made that choice, launching a small force on a desperate dash across the desert with everything to lose? Tell me in the comments. Operation Compass, initially conceived as a limited 5-day raid, concludes on February 9, 1941, having lasted exactly 2 months. It is an astonishing and decisive victory for the British and Commonwealth forces, the first major Allied land victory of the Second World War. General Wavell's strategic vision, combined with Lieutenant General O'Connor's audacious execution, results in the complete destruction of the Italian 10th Army. The Western Desert Force, with approximately 36,000 men at the outset, advances over 800 kilometers, 500 miles, across the desert, from Sidi Barrani in Egypt to El Agheila in Libya. They inflict catastrophic losses on the Italians, capturing a staggering 130,000 to 138,000 prisoners, including 5 generals. Over 400 tanks, 845 to 1,300 artillery pieces, and vast quantities of other war material are seized. In stark contrast, the British and Commonwealth forces suffer remarkably light casualties throughout the entire campaign. Approximately 494 to 500 killed, 1,373 wounded, and 55 missing. This victory not only secures Egypt but also occupies Cyrenaica, the eastern province of Libya, shifting the balance of power in North Africa dramatically. The success of Operation Compass, however, has an unforeseen and profound long-term consequence. The humiliating defeat of his Italian ally prompts Adolf Hitler to intervene directly in North Africa. In February 1941, just as Operation Compass concludes, German forces, the Afrika Korps, under the command of Generalleutnant Erwin Rommel, begin to land in Tripoli. The arrival of Rommel and his panzer divisions will transform the Desert War, leading to a much tougher, protracted struggle that will last for another 2 years. Wavell, despite his brilliant victory, will eventually be replaced as Commander-in-Chief Middle East in July 1941, partly due to his disagreements with Churchill over the diversion of troops to Greece and Crete, and later setbacks against Rommel. Yet, in December 1940, with Operation Compass, Archibald Wavell oversaw one of the most audacious and successful campaigns in British military history, a triumph that momentarily revived Allied spirits in the darkest days of the war. An unexpected fact: despite his immense military response abilities and the pressures of wartime command, General Wavell was a published poet and compiled an anthology of poetry titled Other Men's Flowers, which was published in 1944. If this story moved you, if you think these men deserve to be remembered, leave one word in the comments: audacity. Subscribe for a new forgotten story every week.